I thought I was ready to let go. I had cried enough. I had screamed into my pillow until my throat burned. I had stared at his closed casket, wondering if I should have opened it, just to be sure. But when the company called, asking me to pick up Daniel's things, his work uniform, his ID badge, his hard hat, I didn't expect any of it to hurt anymore. I didn't expect the locker. It was small. Cold. The number 27 scratched into the corner. The manager looked uncomfortable, handing me the key. "Some personal items," he said. Like that explained the stiffness in his tone. When I opened it, I saw the ordinary things. His backup phone charger, a photo of us with my niece, a snack bar long expired. But then there was the box, a wooden box, polished, locked with a simple clasp. There was a word etched faintly on the lid. Private. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I thought he had something to hide. I trusted Daniel. I married him. We were together for 6 years. I knew everything about him, right? I don't remember unfastening the clasp. I only remember the feeling in my chest when it clicked open. Letters. Tied in bundles. Aged paper. Faded ink. All addressed in the same handwriting. All signed with the same name. A. At first I smiled. I thought it was sweet. Maybe he had kept old letters from his youth, something nostalgic. Maybe he had told me about this once, and I had forgotten. The top one was dated June 2013. That was 3 years before we even met. I opened it, expecting teenage drama or college heartbreak. But it wasn't a goodbye letter. It was full of warmth, updates, inside jokes, and love. Not the kind that fades, but the kind that lives. It ended with, "Say hi to our little girl for me. She made my heart explode yesterday." I froze. I flipped to the next letter. This one was from 2015, then 2016, then 2018. Then God March 2024, 2 weeks before he died. They never stopped. I put the box down like it had burned me. I looked around the empty locker room like someone might tell me this was all a mistake. Like maybe I had picked up the wrong box. But no, the photo of us was still there. His handwriting on the side of the charger port. Dan's, "Don't steal." I wasn't supposed to find this. I wasn't supposed to read this. But now that I had, how could I stop? I took the box home. I sat in the dark. And I read. I read about birthdays I hadn't celebrated. About places I'd never heard him mention. About a girl, their daughter, who had his eyes, his laugh, his fear of thunder. I read about anniversary dinners I didn't attend. About arguments I never witnessed. About a life I didn't live. And yet, Daniel had. The man I buried 2 weeks ago was not just my husband. He was someone else's too. And I think she never knew about me. I used to believe we had the kind of marriage that made other people envious. Not flashy, not perfect, but quietly solid. The kind of relationship that didn't need grand gestures to feel real. It was built on shared breakfasts, Sunday grocery runs, and the way his hand always found mine in crowded rooms. I believed in us deeply, until I opened that box. But to understand why it hurt so much, you have to know what came before it. You have to know Daniel, the man I married. We met at a hardware store. Cliché, I know. I was trying to load a 20-pound bucket of paint into the trunk of my car when it slipped and splattered across the pavement. He appeared out of nowhere, tan, tall, in a dusty blue polo and said, "You trying to start a new abstract art movement or something?" I laughed, and so did he. That laugh, I can still hear it if I close my eyes. That's where it began. He asked for my number the next day. I gave it to him without hesitation. That's how quickly he disarmed me. Our first date was uneventful. Tacos, cheap beer, a late-night walk by the lake, but it was effortless. He didn't try too hard, didn't boast, just listened. He had that rare gift making you feel like the only person in the room. Within 3 months, he was sleeping at my apartment 5 nights a week. Within 6, we moved in together. The proposal came on a Thursday. No ring, no candles. He came home late from work, kissed my forehead, and said, "Marry me?" Just like that. I laughed, asked if he was serious. He said, "Dead serious. I don't want to waste another year pretending like this isn't it." I said yes. We had a courthouse wedding. Simple. 2 friends as witnesses. No big dress, no long aisle. And honestly, I didn't care. I didn't need the frills. I just needed him. We got matching silver bands with a tiny inscription inside, "Still us." That was our thing. Whenever things got messy, whenever we argued, one of us would say it, "Still us," and the storm would pass. We never had children. We talked about it, tried for a while. I miscarried once, early. He held me while I cried in the bathtub, kissed the top of my head and whispered, "We're enough." And I believed him. I clung to that sentence like it was truth carved in stone. Looking back, I wonder if that's when the guilt started for him, if there was guilt at all. Maybe he looked at me crying in that tub and thought, "This woman doesn't know who I am." Maybe he pitied me. Daniel traveled often for work. Civil engineer, site supervisor. He'd be gone for days, sometimes weeks, but he always called, always messaged. He'd send pictures of odd buildings or funny signs in diners. Once he mailed me a postcard from a gas station, just because it had a cartoon raccoon wearing sunglasses. It said, "Miss you more than this raccoon, Mrs. Shade." I kept that postcard in my wallet for years. He wasn't perfect. He snored. He hated folding laundry. He always left a spoon in the sink instead of putting it in the dishwasher. But he never raised his voice, never forgot our anniversary. And he always remembered how I liked my coffee. Black, 2 sugars, no lid. He also never mentioned A. Not once. I combed through our old messages after he died, looking for clues. Maybe I'd missed something. A slip of the tongue. A late-night call. A photo background I didn't recognize. But there was nothing. He was meticulous. Or maybe he had lived this lie so long it became second nature. His friends, our mutual ones, didn't know either. When I asked Mark, his coworker, if Daniel ever talked about a previous relationship, he blinked like the idea was foreign. Dan? No, not really. He was kind of private, but he loved you. That much was obvious. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and say, did he love me? Or was I just the second act in his tragic little play? I didn't. I just nodded and thanked him. I think what breaks my heart most is how real it all felt. Because if it wasn't real, if it was just a shadow of his other life, then what does that make me? An extra? A decoy? A placeholder? People always say you'll know if someone's lying. They'll avoid eye contact, stutter, shift in their seat. But Daniel was calm, centered, unshakable. Maybe he had compartmentalized everything so cleanly, there was no conflict left to surface. Or maybe he was just that good. I keep thinking about our last night together. He had come back from a 2-week trip. I made pasta. We watched reruns. He rubbed my feet like he always did when I was tired. He fell asleep on the couch. I covered him with a blanket and kissed his forehead. He whispered, "Still us." That was the last thing he ever said to me. 3 days later, he was dead. They say hindsight is 20/20ths, that once you know, the signs seem obvious, glaring, even. But when you're inside it, when love blinds you like sun through a dirty windshield, the cracks just look like reflections. I see it now. I see all of it. And I hate myself for how long I didn't. It started small. The kind of things you chalk up to stress, fatigue, or just being human. His phone would buzz late at night, and he'd flip it over without checking. Sometimes he'd leave the room to take a call, muttering something about site reports or bad reception. I never questioned it. Daniel worked hard, and I respected that. If he said it was work, I believed him. But there were other things too, stranger things. Once, I found a child's drawing folded up in his coat pocket. A stick figure family, labeled in large blocky letters, "Me, Mommy, Daddy." I laughed, asked him if one of his coworkers' kids had gifted it to him. He looked up, startled just for a second, and then smiled. "Oh yeah, Carl's little girl drew that for all of us. Sweet kid." I believed it. Why wouldn't I? Then there were the clothes. Every few months, a shirt would go missing. Or I'd see a pair of boxers I didn't recognize, slightly different fabric, wrong size. He'd shrug and say he picked them up on sale or got them as a gift from the crew. I'd tease him about his terrible fashion sense, and he'd play along. It became a joke. I didn't realize I was the punchline. There was a weekend Labor Day, 2 years ago. We had planned a cabin getaway. Just the two of us. No cell service, no distractions. I'd booked the place months in advance. But the night before we were set to leave, he got a call. I remember the way his face changed while he was listening, just slightly, like something clenched behind his eyes. When he hung up, he told me the site had flooded. Emergency. They needed him. I was upset. I cried. I begged. I even accused him of putting work above us. He hugged me, kissed my forehead, and whispered, "I promise I'll make it up to you." And just like that, I folded, like I always did. That weekend, he didn't call once. I told myself he was busy, that reception was bad, that he'd come back tired and apologize with flowers or a handwritten note. He didn't. Instead, he came back tanned, relaxed, with a shell bracelet around his wrist I'd never seen before. Someone at the diner was selling them, he said. I didn't push. But that night, I checked his duffel bag while he was in the shower. There was sand in the lining. I still didn't say anything. I don't know what held me back, fear, maybe, or shame, or just the simple, terrible fact that I loved him too much to risk losing the version of him I wanted to be real. I kept choosing the beautiful lie over the ugly truth. One winter, he forgot our anniversary. I should have seen that as a red flag. But he looked so genuinely sorry, eyes wide, hands trembling, that I believed he was just overwhelmed. He took me out to dinner 2 nights later. Fancy place. He wore cologne I didn't recognize. New scent, he said. A coworker's wife sells it. Later, I found the same cologne in a woman's review blog. She wrote, "My husband wears this when we go on dates. It drives me crazy." Still, I told myself it was just a coincidence. Sometimes he'd come home smelling like baby powder. Once, I found a pink hair tie in the car. I don't wear pink. I don't even have long hair. He told me it belonged to one of his coworkers' daughters. He'd given them a ride from a school fundraiser. That lie held for 2 years. Then there was the hotel receipt. I was doing laundry when I found it, tucked inside a pocket. A single night stay at a comfort inn, 3 towns away. It didn't match any of his trip logs. When I asked, he said the job site was overbooked, and they had to crash nearby. I remember how quickly the lie came out of his mouth. No stuttering, no hesitation. It scared me. Still, I nodded, smiled, said, "Makes sense," because the alternative was unbearable. What kind of woman suspects her husband of living a double life and says nothing? What kind of wife sees a dozen signs and chooses to bury them? Me. That's who. Because it's easier to ignore the tremor than admit the foundation is failing. Because if I had confronted him and been wrong, I would have felt like the bad guy. And if I had confronted him and been right, I would have lost everything. Now I realize I lost it anyway. I kept a journal during our marriage, silly little entries, mostly gratitude lists. Daniel made pancakes today. We danced in the kitchen. He kissed me while I was brushing my teeth. Looking back, the gaps are more telling than the words. Weeks without mention of him. Days where the only entry was, "Exhausted. He's not home yet." Love isn't supposed to feel like waiting. And yet, that's what I did. Waited for calls. Waited for texts. Waited for him to come home. To explain. To notice I was starting to see him more clearly. He never did. The letters changed that. They forced me to confront the truth I'd tiptoed around for too long. And yet, some dark part of me wonders, if he hadn't died, would I have ever opened that box? I didn't read them all in one sitting. I couldn't. The first night, I managed 5 letters before I had to stop. My hands were trembling, and my eyes couldn't focus. Each letter felt like a pin driven into the skin, not deep enough to bleed, but sharp enough to leave you aching. It wasn't just what was written, but how it was written. The intimacy, the quiet familiarity, the way she spoke to him as if no one else in the world could ever truly know him. She used his name sparingly. Mostly, it was "my love" or "you," sometimes "D," sometimes "husband." The second letter I read began with, "Elena learned to ride her bike today. She kept looking over her shoulder to see if you were watching. I told her Daddy would be proud, and I know you would have been." I reread that line over and over again. Elena. A name. A child. A daughter. A daughter I had never met. A daughter he never mentioned. And still, he had smiled at me the same way every day, kissed my forehead, called me my girl, held my hand like there wasn't a whole world out there where he was someone else entirely. Some letters were short 2, 3 paragraphs. Updates. Elena started ballet. We planted the lemon tree you wanted. The roof finally gave in. We need to talk about repairs. Others were sprawling, page after page, filled with memories, regrets, and longing. She'd write about anniversaries they spent apart, about the way she missed his cooking, about the way the house creaked more when she was alone at night. One letter, dated 5 years ago, broke me. Do you ever miss how we used to be? Sometimes I wonder if she knows about me. I wonder if she sees it in your eyes when you come back. Guilt has a smell, you know, and you never lie well. But then I think, if you still come home to me, after all this time, maybe that's answer enough. I dropped the paper. She knew. Not everything, not clearly, but something. She suspected. And she still let it happen. I tried to stop. I told myself that reading more would only make things worse. That none of it mattered now. He was gone. Dead. No amount of ink on a page could undo that. But then I'd think about Elena. About how many birthdays I must have unknowingly stood in the shadow of. About how many nights he'd left me to be with them. I opened another. This one started with a photo. A printed snapshot creased and faded from what looked like a school play. A little girl in a cardboard crown, holding a fake sword, grinning into the camera. Daniel stood beside her, kneeling, his arm draped across her shoulders. I'd seen that smile before. He used it with me too. The same warmth, the same pride. I flipped the photo over. In her handwriting, "Our little night. You missed her first line, but you made it for the bow. She lit up when she saw you." That letter was dated just 10 months before he died. I couldn't breathe. My stomach churned with something worse than jealousy displacement. Where was I that day? What was I doing? Had I cooked him dinner when he came home, unaware he'd just been with his other family? I looked at the dates more carefully now, aligned them with his trips. The flooded site weekend? There was a letter dated that Monday. "Thanks for building her that swing set. She hasn't stopped talking about it. She said you promised to come next weekend too." Next weekend, he told me he was on a late shift. He came home with sawdust in his hair and said the crew was running behind schedule. He wasn't lying. He just wasn't talking to me. The box contained more than just letters. Folded receipts, tiny drawings, notes from Elena written in shaky, colorful crayon. "To Daddy, I love you more than jelly beans." I held one of them in my hand for a long time, wondering if she'd ever even heard my name. If Daniel ever mentioned me. If she thought she was his only daughter, or if, deep down, she knew. I found a hospital bracelet, a newborn's ID tag. Elena R.F. Dobb. The 18th of March, 2017. Daniel's name was listed as the emergency contact. I did the math. March 2017. He and I had been married for almost a year. I stumbled back from the box. My knees hit the coffee table. I knocked over a glass. It shattered, but I didn't move. The sound barely registered. He had a child with her while he was married to me. I opened the last letter, the most recent one. It was dated exactly 2 weeks before his death. "Hey you, I know you hate letters when we just saw each other, but I had to write this one. Maybe because something felt off this time. Not bad, just different. You seemed distracted. You kissed me, but it felt like you were saying goodbye. Are you okay? Is something wrong? Don't shut me out. Not now. Not after all this. Come home soon. Elena's been asking if we're still going on the trip. She's packed her bag already. Don't make her wait. Asterisk." That was it. No signature. Just the pressed indentation of a tear stain at the bottom. I read it again. And again. The words etched themselves into my chest. He had seen them just before he died. His last trip wasn't a work trip. It was a visit to them. And that meant, when he kissed me goodbye that morning, when he told me he'd be back before Sunday, he knew he was going to see her. He had a bag packed. I hadn't thought much of it. He always traveled light. But now, what if he was going to stay this time? What if the accident took away the very moment he was about to choose? Or what if he had already chosen? I couldn't sleep. After reading the last letter, I sat on the floor, surrounded by scraps of another life, his real life. The photo of Elena in her cardboard crown stared up at me from the coffee table. Her eyes were wide and bright. They looked so much like his. Too much. I tried to be rational, to believe there had to be some kind of mistake, some cosmic confusion. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe he had donated money to a friend, or mentored a kid from some community program. Maybe God, I don't know, maybe I had invented the entire thing in my head, warped by grief and exhaustion. But that theory shattered the moment I searched her name. I had one clue, the name signed at the bottom of a few letters. Allison. I remembered it clearly now. He once joked about the name during a trivia night, something about too many Allisons in his high school. I'd never thought twice. I opened Facebook, typed Allison plus Elena in the search bar, filtered by city. Dozens of profiles appeared, most locked. I scrolled for nearly an hour before I saw it. A woman in her late 30s. Auburn hair, freckled shoulders. Her profile picture was with a little girl, maybe 7 or 8, wearing a pink raincoat and oversized glasses. Her cheeks were puffed in a grin, showing a missing front tooth. She looked familiar. I clicked on her photos. My hands went numb. There he was, Daniel, in a park, holding Elena on his shoulders, laughing. The caption read, "Best weekend ever with Daddy." My breath caught in my throat. My entire body went cold. He wasn't wearing his wedding ring in that photo. I scrolled further. There were more photos. Birthdays, school events, beach trips, backyard cookouts. In one, Allison kissed his cheek while he grilled hot dogs. In another, they were all huddled under a blanket fort in a living room that was not ours. But that wasn't the part that broke me. It was the photo dated August 2016, 2 months after our wedding. It was a wedding photo. Their wedding. Daniel in a charcoal suit. Allison in a simple ivory dress, holding hands under a gazebo covered in white roses. He was smiling that smile. The same one he gave me. The one I thought was mine. I opened the image fully, zoomed in on the officiant's certificate framed in the background. The date was clear. The county seal was clear. It wasn't a vow renewal. It wasn't a photo shoot. It was a legal wedding. One I had never known about. I stared at the screen, my reflection ghosting back at me, blurred by tears. My mind scrambled for explanations. Had he married her before me and just never filed for divorce? Was I the second wife illegally? Or had I been the affair all along? I went to our filing cabinet, pulled out our marriage license. It looked real. But the more I stared, the more I noticed. The officiant's signature was scrawled differently than I remembered. And the witness names 2 strangers. No one, I recalled. I searched those names. They didn't exist. Or if they did, they weren't online. Something wasn't right. I dug into public records. It took hours, multiple databases, and more than one payment to access archive certificates, but eventually, the truth surfaced. Daniel Reyes was married to Allison Carter in 2012. There was no divorce record, no legal separation, nothing. And my marriage license? Filed under the name Daniel A.R. Same birth date, different middle name, different social security number, a duplicate identity. I was never legally married to him. I wasn't his wife. Not in the eyes of the law. Not on paper. Not in truth. I was the other woman. I fell to my knees in the living room. Everything, our vows, our photos, our shared bank account, our vacations, it was all a facade, a second life he wore like a costume. And worse, I recognized her. That's what haunted me the most. Allison. Now that I had a full name, I remembered her face. Not from Facebook, from real life. She came to our engagement party. Not as a guest, not even as a friend. As the caterer, she worked with a small event company in town. We had met her only once before, during the tasting. Daniel had been strangely quiet during that meeting, distracted. I'd assumed he was tired from work. She had introduced herself with a soft smile, shook my hand, told me, "Congratulations, He seems like a good one. I remembered blushing, laughing, saying something stupid like, he is. I got lucky. She looked at him then, just briefly. He didn't meet her eyes. They were still married. They had a child, and they both looked me in the eye and said nothing. I vomited into the kitchen sink. My head spun with memories. That strange energy at the tasting, her eyes lingering too long, his fake cough, the way he excused himself to take a phone call right before dessert. It hadn't been a coincidence. It had been a test. Did she come to see if I knew? Did she suspect he was building a second life and chose that moment to confirm it? Or worse, did she already know and let me walk right into it? My skin burned. My body felt alien. I wanted to tear out of it, run, scream, do anything but sit in the realization that my entire life was built on someone else's foundation. A stolen one. I printed the photo of their wedding, taped it to the fridge. I wanted to see it every morning. I wanted to remember what I had ignored, what he chose to hide. I looked at our own wedding photo framed on the mantel. We were laughing. Mid-step, rice in the air. I ripped it from the frame. On the back, he'd written, Stilos. Number, Neverus. Grief is supposed to make you soft, fragile. It's supposed to shatter you into 1,000 trembling pieces. But this wasn't grief. This was rage. Cold, precise, and eerily quiet. Something inside me had snapped, not with a scream, but a whisper. I no longer cried, no longer stared blankly into space wondering how he could do this to me. I knew how. He had done it methodically, over years, and I had played my part. The smiling wife, the trusting fool, the woman who made him coffee while he sent birthday gifts to another daughter. No more. I began with the basics. First, the legalities. I made copies of everything. Our fake marriage license, his real one with Allison, the child's birth certificate I found online. I compiled it all into a folder labeled simply Daniel Reyes. Truth. I didn't know who I'd show it to yet. Maybe no one. But I needed it to be real, concrete, documented. I went through our bank accounts. There were transfers. Nothing huge, but consistent. Always to the same checking account under a name I didn't recognize, A. Carter. Allison's maiden name. He'd masked them as contractor payments. They'd been happening since 2017, the year Elena was born. I printed them all, highlighted each one. Next, the storage unit. We had one across town. Daniel said it was for tools, gear, stuff I don't need at home. I'd only been there once. The key had always been on his car fob. I found it in a small tin he kept in the closet, tucked between loose change and an old pocket knife. I drove there at noon on a Wednesday, alone. No makeup, hoodie, hat low. I didn't want anyone to remember me. The unit was small, dusty, but inside, it held remnants of a life that didn't belong to me. A second set of everything. A smartphone. A second wallet filled with gift cards, receipts from towns he never told me he'd visited. A framed photo of Allison and Elena. A wrapped present labeled, For E's Recital. I sat on the concrete floor and stared at it all. He had built escape hatches into every part of our marriage. Little doors he could disappear through, switch faces, switch lives. I had been living in a marriage with trapdoors. I took everything, loaded it into the trunk, shut the unit, didn't look back. That night, I opened the second phone. It was old, slow, but it worked. No passcode. Inside were hundreds of photos. Most were of Elena, her first steps, birthday cakes, toothless grins, but others were of Allison, him and her at barbecues, on road trips, at what looked like a family reunion. One video made my hand freeze mid-scroll. It was Elena's birthday. Daniel held the camera. Allison leaned into the frame. Say hi to Daddy, birthday girl. Elena, no older than 4, squealed, Hi, Daddy. Thank you for the princess dress. I love you. And then, softly, Daniel's voice off camera. I love you too, baby. More than anything. He never used that tone with me. Not once. I closed the phone. That night, I began the process of removing him. Not from my life. From my memory. I deleted his contact from my phone. I packed away our wedding photos, our mementos, every card he ever gave me. I dumped his clothes into garbage bags not to donate. I threw them out, one by one, down the trash chute at midnight. It wasn't a ceremony. It was an exorcism. I visited a lawyer the next day. Technically, she said, flipping through my documents, your marriage wasn't valid. He committed bigamy under a false identity. That's a felony in this state. I nodded. I didn't need revenge. Not anymore. But I wanted truth. I wanted a record of what he'd done, even if only for me. She filed a formal report, helped me nullify all joint accounts, advised me on how to reclaim my name, my real name, the one I had before he rewrote my story. For 6 years, I had been Mrs. Reyes. Now I was just me. It was quieter than I expected. Not empowering, not devastating, just empty. I made a will. Not because I had anything of value, but because I wanted to make sure that if anything happened to me, someone would find the folder. Someone would know who he really was. I wrote a letter to Allison. I didn't send it. Not yet. But I needed to say the words. To the woman I never truly knew. You were not a stranger. You were not an enemy. You were a mirror I refused to look into. I don't know what you knew, or when you knew it, but I hope for both our sakes that it wasn't the whole story. Because if you knew and stayed, then maybe we are both fools. But if you didn't, then I'm sorry. Because you lost him too. And you lost him before I even knew I was stealing him. Asterisk. I signed it with my full name. No Mrs. No title. Just the truth. And as I folded the letter, I realized something strange. I didn't miss him. I missed the version of him I thought I had. The man who made pancakes on Sundays, who danced with me barefoot in the kitchen, who whispered, "Still us," in the dark. But that man never existed. He was a ghost he played for me. And I had been in love with a performance. Now the curtain was down. The stage was empty. And I was the last one left in the theater. There was no dramatic goodbye. No final scream, no suitcase thrown down the stairs. No one begging anyone to stay. The day I walked away wasn't a thunderstorm. It was a clear, dry morning. Crisp. Almost gentle. Like the universe was trying to make it easier to disappear. I didn't pack much. Just the essentials. My clothes. My laptop. The box of letters. The second photo. The fake marriage certificate. A few photos not of him, but of me. Smiling. Before I left the ring behind, I placed it on the kitchen counter, next to the empty coffee mug he used to pretend to make my room. He never remembered the second sugar. Always just one. That used to annoy me. Now it made me laugh. I wrote my mind. I owed no explanation. He was already gone, after all. All that remained of him were memories I no longer trusted, and a house that smelled faintly of betrayal and corona. I looked around one last time. The living room, where we used to binge-watch shows and fall asleep with our legs tangled. The bedroom, where he kissed the back of my neck before leaving on work trips. The hallway, where I had once danced barefoot in his flannel shirt, convinced that love was safe and real and mine. None of it felt like mine anymore. I turned off the lights, locked the door, slid the keys into the mailbox, and walked away. Not forever. The lease still had 3 months, but I knew I'd never come back. That place had become a mausoleum full of things I'd buried without knowing it. I moved into a small apartment across town, month-to-month lease. No decorations, just clean walls, soft towels, and silence. I liked it. I didn't have to share the space with ghosts. People texted. Friends, family, his co-workers. Hey, just checking in. Let us know if you need anything. Daniel would have wanted you to stay strong. I ignored most of them. I didn't need comfort from people who only knew the illusion, who thought our love story was cut short by tragedy, not exposed by a trail of secrets wrapped in ribbon and tears. One person I did call was my mother. I hadn't told her everything just enough. That Daniel hadn't been who I thought. That I needed space. That I was starting over. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Good. It's about damn time." I visited the cemetery once. His headstone was simple, granite, polished. His full name, the fake one I'd married, etched in neat serif font. There were fresh flowers beside it. Roses. Not from me. I stood there for a long time, not crying, just thinking. I wondered if Allison had been there, if she had brought Elena, if she stood in the same place, holding her daughter's hand, whispering a goodbye I was never meant to witness. Did she know about me now? Had she found anything? Or was she still living in the story he left her? I never found the courage to ask. But I left something on the grave that day, a photo. Not of us. Of him. Alone. Smiling. Laughing at something off camera. I tore it in half. Dropped the pieces into the grass. And walked away again. That was the second time. The first time had been physical, leaving the house, packing the boxes. This one was spiritual. Letting go. I deleted his number from every device. Cleared the cloud storage. Removed every tag on social media. Erased the trail. Except for the folder. That I kept. Not as revenge. Not as evidence. As memory. The real kind. The kind not filtered by denial or wishful thinking. I began to reclaim my life slowly. Coffee shops where no one knew my name. Evening walks with no destination. Journals filled with words that didn't begin with we. I made a new email address. Updated my resume. Started applying for jobs outside the city. I wanted distance not just from him, but from the version of me that accepted half-truths and called it love. I even started therapy. The counselor didn't blink when I told her about the bigamy. She just asked, "When did you first stop trusting yourself?" That question haunted me. Not when did I stop trusting him, but myself. I didn't answer her that day. I still haven't, but I think I will. Eventually, because the real betrayal wasn't that Daniel lied. It was that I believed him over and over against my own instincts. And now, I was learning to believe myself again. That was the day I walked away. From the lie. From the fantasy. From the idea that love, no matter how sweet, was always safe. And as I closed the door to my new place that night, I whispered something out loud, just for me. Still May. I thought I was done with him. I thought death had taken what was left, that the silence would finally settle. But grief is never tidy. And liars, even when buried, have a way of reaching back into your life. It started with an envelope. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I recognized instantly. Slanted, deliberate, familiar. His. My heart stalled. For a moment I convinced myself it was old. Maybe something I'd forgotten. Something he'd written for an anniversary and never gave me. Maybe a love note. I opened it anyway. Inside were 2 sheets of paper. One typed, one handwritten. The typed one was short, formal, stiff. A legal document, unsigned. It was titled Revised Will, Draft. It stated that all personal effects, assets, and property under the name Daniel A. Reyes were to be divided equally between my legal spouse, Allison C., and a long-term domestic partner, my name, whom I consider family, in all but formality. My hands clenched. Even now, he couldn't say it. Couldn't name what I was. Just a partner. Not a wife. Not someone he wronged. Just a quiet acknowledgement tucked in a folder I was never meant to see. I flipped to the second page. His handwriting. If you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to explain. I know what I've done is unforgivable. I know what I've taken from you. But I never lied about how I felt. What we had it was real. Every smile. Every fight. Every morning waking up next to you. It wasn't fake. I wasn't faking. I was trapped. Caught in something I didn't know how to undo without destroying everything. I should have told you. I was a coward for not doing it. I thought I could live 2 lives. I thought I could make it work. And I failed. I'm sorry. For all of it. For the pain I've caused. I hope someday you'll remember me. Not for what I broke, but for what we built in between the breaking. Stilus. I stared at those 2 words for a long time. Stilus. It used to be our promise, our reassurance. Now, it was just manipulation wrapped in sentimentality. I should have cried. I didn't. Instead, I laughed. It was the kind of laugh that cracked down the middle. A sharp sound. Not joy, but disbelief. Because even in his final words, he tried to write the story his way. He made himself the victim. Trapped. Conflicted. A man who didn't know how to undo things. But he did know how to build them. And built 2 lives, 2 homes, 2 women who believed they were his one and only. He didn't stumble into this. He planned it, protected it, sustained it. This letter wasn't a confession. It was an epilogue crafted to soothe the guilt he never had to face. And worst of all, he mailed it. That meant he had written it before the accident. He had known something was coming. Or at the very least, he had feared it. Had he been planning to tell me? To come me clean? Or had he sent it as insurance, a final lifeline to make himself look better if everything fell apart? I checked the postmark. It was dated 2 days before he died. That lined up with the letter from Allison, the one where she wrote, "You seem distracted, like you were saying goodbye." Maybe he had planned to end it all. Not his life, but the lie. Maybe he was going to tell her, or me, or both. Maybe he was tired of juggling. Maybe the weight of the truth had finally cracked something in him. But then, why mail the letter? Why not say it to my face? Why not show the courage he claimed to lack? Because Daniel didn't want to take responsibility. He wanted to control the narrative. Even in death, he wanted to be remembered as torn, tormented, tragic, not selfish, not strategic, not a fraud. I put the letter back in the envelope and sealed it in the same folder as the bank records, the marriage license, the hospital bracelet. Let it sit with the rest of the truth. But something else had changed. This wasn't about Allison anymore, or Elena. This was about me. What I allowed, what I denied, what I needed to finally let go of. Because Daniel's last words weren't for me. They were for himself. A way to feel absolved. A way to make sure someone still believed in the man he pretended to be. But I don't. Not anymore. I wrote my own letter that night. Didn't send it. Didn't sign it. Just left it folded under my pillow. You were never trapped. You chose this. Repeatedly. Every day you came home with sand in your shoes and another story on your lips. Every time you looked at me with those eyes full of lies. You wanted it all. And when it collapsed, you didn't try to fix it. You tried to rewrite it. But I lived it. Every second, every word, every silence. And now? Now I choose to forget. That was the last time I let myself think of him as someone I loved. Not because I didn't, but because the version I loved never existed. People love to talk about closure like it's some clean, ceremonial thing. Like it comes tied with a bow. Like you get to sit across from the person who hurt you, hear their apology, maybe even cry, and then poof, it's over. But real closure? It's ugly. Uneven. It happens when no one's looking. Mine came in pieces. First, the documents. Then, the letters. Then, the silence. But the final piece, my last fragment of closure, arrived when I least expected it. Not through him. He was already gone. But through her. Allison. She sent me an email. The subject line was, Elena. Just that. No greeting. No apology. No explanation. I hovered over the message for a full hour before opening it. It was 2 sentences. She asked why you left the picture at the grave. I didn't know what to tell her. No anger. No accusation. Just confusion. Pain. Maybe guilt. I didn't respond. At least, not right away. But the message stayed with me. It gnawed at me. Not because I owed her anything, but because he had left behind a mess neither of us volunteered for. So, I wrote back. Because it wasn't his story alone to finish. And because she deserved to see the man as he really was, flawed, selfish, and still capable of loving you both. I left the photo because I needed her to know he didn't just disappear. He unraveled. And so did we. She didn't reply. I didn't expect her to. But for the first time, I felt something shift. Not peace, but air, like I had finally exhaled after months of holding my breath. A few days later, I got a call from an unknown number. I don't usually answer those, but some quiet instinct told me to pick up. It was a woman's voice, soft, controlled. "Allison gave me your number," she said. I was Daniel's sister." I froze. He had never mentioned a sister, never talked about family at all. "I'm sorry," I said. She paused. "Don't be. I needed to tell someone the truth, someone who didn't know him as the golden boy." I sat down. She told me things I never expected. That Daniel had always been good at compartmentalizing. That he ran from consequences. That he lied to their parents about school, jobs, girlfriends, everything. That they hadn't spoken in years. She said, "When I found out he died, I didn't cry. But then I found out about you, and Allison, and the kid, and I realized he never stopped." I asked her why she was calling me. "Because I think you're the only one who won't try to protect his image," she said. She asked if I still had the letters. "Yes." "Then don't burn them," she said. "Don't throw them away. Not yet. Someday, Elena might want to know. And when that day comes, she deserves truth. Not just the version her mother gives her. Not just the edited story Daniel tried to leave behind." I promised I wouldn't. We hung up, and I cried. Not for him, not for myself, for the little girl who would one day piece together the fragments of a father split in two, and for the women, both of us, who had spent years loving a man who didn't love us enough to be honest. That night, I went back to the box. I laid out every letter, every photo, every receipt. I labeled them, dated them, put them in order. Then I wrote a final page. "To Elena, this isn't for now. This is for someday. When the story you were told starts to feel thin, when the questions grow teeth, when you look in the mirror and wonder what parts of him are staring back. I can't answer all of it, but I can give you this. He loved you. I believe that. But love doesn't erase damage. It doesn't cancel out deception. It just coexists with it uncomfortably. He wasn't a monster. He wasn't a hero. He was your father. And he was my husband. Sort of." I sealed the folder, wrote one word on the cover. Unfinished. Because closure isn't always quiet. Sometimes it arrives in fragments. In emails. In awkward phone calls. In late-night memories that haunt and heal all at once. Sometimes closure isn't clean. It just means choosing to stop asking for more. And I had finally stopped. The first morning I woke up and didn't think of him felt strange. Not liberating, not triumphant, just quiet. Like walking into a room and forgetting what you came for, and then realizing you don't need it anymore. I made coffee strong, black, 2 sugars, and smiled when I got it right. Because I remembered. Because no one else had to. Life didn't magically heal. There were still days when I woke up disoriented, forgetting what month it was, what name I was supposed to answer to. There were still dreams, occasionally his voice calling me from another room, or the weight of his arm around me like a phantom limb. But when I opened my eyes, the room was mine. The space was mine. The breath I took belonged to no one but me. I started small. I bought a plant. It sounds trivial, I know, but it was the first thing I'd ever owned that wasn't part of us. It didn't remind me of a vacation we took, or an apartment we shared. It was mine. I named it Sage. She's still alive. I took walks in the evening, tried cooking new things. Messed up most of them. Burned rice 3 times in a row. But I laughed. Not the performative kind I used to use when he was watching, but real laughter. Clumsy. Unexpected. Mine. I signed up for a pottery class. Terrible at it. Still went back. Eventually, I applied for a job in another city, smaller, slower. I didn't tell anyone. I just went. Found a tiny apartment with creaky floors and huge windows. It gets too cold at night, but I love that. I bought new mugs, new towels, new sheets. Not replacements beginnings. I don't date. Not yet. Maybe not for a while. Trust isn't something I hand out lightly anymore, but I also don't flinch when someone says love. I don't recoil when I see couples holding hands in parks. I don't measure my healing by how fast I can forget him. I measure it by how often I choose myself. The truth is, there is no final chapter to pain. No clean cut where it bleeds out and stops staining everything. But there is movement. There is a day when you open your eyes and realize you didn't cry yesterday. Or the day before, and maybe you won't today either. Closure isn't silence. It's a door you close gently. Not to lock someone out, but to keep yourself safe inside. I no longer carry the folder with me. It's in a locked drawer, stored not for revenge or validation but for honesty. For the girl who may come looking one day, when she's old enough to ask the right questions. I'll be ready. And when that time comes, I won't tell her how much he hurt me. I'll tell her what I learned. That love without truth is hollow. That silence is its own form of betrayal. That we are not defined by what we lose, but by what we choose to rebuild. Most importantly, I'll tell her this. Your life is yours. Make sure the future you build doesn't ask you to vanish inside someone else's story, because mine did, until I rewrote it. And now, for the first time, my future plan finally includes me.